word for today is Acts 17:26. And he has made from one blood every nation of men to dwell on all the face of the earth, and has determined their pre-appointed times and the boundaries of their dwellings. Our verse today tells us that God has created one race and has determined where they live and when they live. Let's look at the words of the text. It begins by saying that he has made. This word, poieo, means to make or to cause or to produce. It's the same word that is used in the Septuagint, which is the Greek translation of the Old Testament, in Genesis 1:1, when it says, "In the beginning God created the heavens and the earth." This verse is used in verse 24 also, where it tells us, as Paul states, that God made the world. So this made here refers to the creation of man. It's an aorist active verb, which tells us that this is something that was done and completed in the past. This refers to God's act of creation in Genesis, where God has made man. Look at the rest of the text. It tells us that he is made from one blood. Now, some Greek manuscripts do not have the word blood there. Some of the earlier manuscripts just have the word one. This word one is the Greek word henos. It actually is a word that means one, and it's masculine, and the idea is that he is made from one what? One man, which refers back to Adam. The word from here is the word ek. It is to be translated from, but it can be also understood as out of. So it's telling us that God has made out from one every nation of men who dwell on the face of the earth. It is interesting to note also that he tells us in this text that God has made from one man, Adam, every nation of men. The word every is the Greek word pan here. It means all or everyone. And the word nation, very important word, is the Greek word ethnos. We get the word ethnic from it, or ethnic group. And what the Bible is telling us is that God made from one man, Adam, every single ethnic group. And notice that he tells us in this text that ethnos is of men. In other words, of mankind. That's the word anthropon, which means all of mankind. All of mankind makes up every ethnos. Every ethnos comes from one man, Adam. And the Bible tells us that God made out from one man every single ethnic group to dwell on all of the face of the earth. In other words, the purpose of God creating man was not that man would remain in one spot, but that man would dwell, he would live on all of the earth. The word dwell here in this text comes from a Greek word kata oikeo. It actually has two words, kata and oikeo, or oikos, from which we get the word house from. It simply means to settle down or to have a permanent residence. So God has made mankind of all ethnic groups to dwell or to have a permanent residence on all the face of the earth. The word face here is the word that we actually get our word for human face or countenance. It also has the idea of appearance or the surface of something. And it could be translated that God has made man to dwell on all the surface of the earth. It's also important to note that the word earth here is the word geis. It simply means land. It's telling us that God has made man to dwell on all the land of the earth. All means every part of it, all the land that God has created for man to dwell upon. It is also important to note that God has a purpose in mind with man, and that he has determined, very important word here, the Greek word is horizo. We get the word horizon from. In other words, you look out over the horizon and you see the limit, the end of something. The point is, it being an aorist verb means that God has in the past determined something. He has set the limits, or he has made a determination. And what has he determined? It tells us in the text that he has determined their pre-appointed times and the boundaries of their dwellings. This is telling us that God has not only determined to create man, but also that he has determined the times that he lives and where he lives. Everything about man, God is in control of. The word translated here, pre-appointed, is the word protasso. It is a perfect verb, which means it has a starting point and it continues into a current state. In other words, God has pre-appointed, predetermined certain times. And the word times is the Greek word kairos. It means seasons of times, epochs of times. And men have lived at certain times in certain places, and they have lived this way because God has determined it to be so. The ethnic groups, or as translated here, the nations, live where they live and are where they are because God has determined that that is where they are to be. So the Bible tells us that God has determined their pre-appointed seasons when they live, and also he has told us that he has predetermined their boundaries, the boundaries of their dwellings. The word boundaries here is the word that has the idea of setting a limit. It comes from a word that means to have a preset boundary. Another way of saying this is what Job 12:23 says. He makes nations great, he destroys them, he enlarges nations, and he guides them. In other words, God is the one who determines where and when nations exist and how large the nation may become. The word dwelling is the Greek word we get our word habitation from. It means settlement. It also is akin to the word up here to dwell. This is the verb form, this is the noun form. It means habitation. So the Bible's telling us that God has created one race, and all the ethnic groups, all of them, have come from one. And who is that one? Adam. In fact, if you remember, the Bible tells us in Genesis 3:20, and Adam called his wife's name Eve because she is the mother of all living. Notice this. Eve is the mother of all living. Malachi 2:10 says, have we not all one Father? Has not God created us? And in Genesis 9:19, the Bible says, these three were the sons of Noah, and from these the whole earth was populated. Now, where did the sons of Noah come from? They came from Adam and Eve. The Bible's very clear that God has created from one man every ethnic group that has ever populated any land on this planet. We are all one human race. Not multiple races, but one human race. And we're all a variety of that human race. We are black, we are white, we are red, we are yellow, we have black hair, blonde hair, brown hair, red hair, we have blue eyes, green eyes, brown eyes. We are all different, but we're all one human race. And God is the one who has determined where we live and how long we live there. Ken Ham, who has written much on this subject, wrote in one chapter of a book, One Blood, he said this, and I quote, scientists today agree that there is really one biological race of humans. Geneticists have found that if we were to take any two people from anywhere in the world, the basic genetic difference between these two people would typically be around 0.2%, even if they came from the same people group. Racial characteristics account for only 6% of this 0.2% variation. That means that the racial genetic variation between human beings of different race is a mere 0.012%. Overall, there is far more variation within a people group than there is between one people group and another. Anyone who continues to make racist distinctions does so based upon superficial outward appearances rather than on sound scientific fact and clear biblical reasoning. And that is the word for today.